Welcome to another episode of Daddy Confessions. I'm your boy John, and today I have a old friend of mine. We went to college together. I feel like I have a lot of people on here I went to college with, so I've been calling a lot of favors from people I went to college with. I have Dr. Norja Cunningham. I will let Dr. Cunningham introduce herself. Go right ahead.
Hello, I am Dr. Norja Elizabeth Cunningham. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist and have a doctorate in marriage and family therapy. I have been practicing since 2005 and have been in private practice since 2015, working with individuals, families, and couples.
Cool.
I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, Dr. Cunningham, thank you for being. It's so weird calling you Dr. Cunningham, but
That's
Dr. Not because you
Dr.
shouldn't,
C, Norja, it's all right. I know Camp Trenchard days. We connected
Yeah.
from college, so understood.
But it's so glad. I'm so glad to have you here. When I found out that you were doing family therapy, I was like, you know what, I have to have her on because this is something that anybody who listens to the podcast, anybody who knows me, knows that I believe in therapy. I believe in counseling. I believe it's a very important part of not just in the family situation, but in individuals' lives as well. And it's obviously something that we know as Black people is only recently becoming a thing that Black people are doing, right? So, so with that said, I wanted to talk today with you about first what got you into the field of family therapy and marriage counseling.
So it's sort of dual. If I look at it from the perspective of the entirety of my life, I've always valued family. That's something that has been a part of my upbringing, as well as something that I believe that I really latched onto and held on to. And because of that, and honoring family, I knew that I wanted to work with families. But as far as the professional side of things, I have had opportunities to be able to intern with youth, once going into psychology. And while working with them, I realized that the outcome as far as their treatment usually was short lived if I only worked with them individually. So it required that I worked with them and their parents and anyone else within their system or their environment that had influence in their life. And that actually helped them to be able to have longer lasting change and positive outcomes in treatment. So that's the short answer.
Cool. No, that makes complete sense, and it is obviously, we talk about it takes a village to raise a child. Honestly, it can break a child too, right? Like if you're not, if the village isn't strong enough, if there's issues within that unit where everybody's not getting their opportunity to kind of work through their issues, that gets passed along as well, right? So
Well,
go for it.
I would say that I agree that there is influence on a youth and any other person, depending on their environment that they're in.
Right.
Meaning relationships when they are healthy or when they're toxic do have influence.
Yeah.
At the same time, I do believe that there is different levels of resilience within people to be able to weather particular things. So, for example, if there are individuals that may be within a home that have dealt with major traumas, whether it be physical or other forms of abuse that could have occurred, or witnessing domestic violence, I've seen individuals actually do quite well and thrive beyond those situations, or even despite those situations. So that shows a level of psychological and emotional resilience. Does it mean that they might not have work to do as far as their mental health and their well-being? No, because I do believe that everyone has their work, right? In order to be able to be at their best or to continue to grow and develop as a person. At the same time, I think there's something to be said about the strength of the human spirit in order to endure different things that happen within life that we don't like. And then part of the reason why I say that too is because even looking at it from a theoretical standpoint, because I teach as a adjunct professor as well, and I like theory. And there's one theory, and it's called Bowenian family therapy, where he focuses on the fact that you can work with one individual, because even helping them process through the constraints within their relationships, triangulation, which is essentially different relationships where maybe people build coalitions and then make other people feel like they are pushed away.
Mm,
But if they're able to get to a place of differentiation, and that helps them to reduce their angst within their system, them and them alone are able to shift the entire system. So, from one perspective, it is that systemically, do we influence each other? Yes. At the same time, depending on how we perceive our own environment, our relationships, our situation, it can actually lend to a person who is emotionally and is psychologically differentiated within their family to still be the difference within their family, within their neighborhood, within their social circle, within society. So that those are the points where change are possible, right? Because if a family's used to doing things a certain way, and that's kind of the rule of thumb, and then all of a sudden you have one person that decides to be different, it can shift things for the family if other people latch on to that.
right.
So I think that's the hope in the process of working with families as well, is that even when working with one, it still doesn't mean that it will not have a positive ripple effect in others' lives.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I appreciate you bringing that up, because it kind of leads into my next question, which is focusing on couples, right? So when you talk to couples, um, what are some of the things that you see that make it um, uh, a difficult transition for a couple when they are either starting a family or early on in their lives as a family, and our kids part of some of, I mean, I would say from my personal perspective, kids
Mhm.
are always part of the what's the word I want to use, um the moments that we have in our relationship that are the most divisive, right? When
Mhm.
before we had kids, we were golden, and then rearing kids kind of brought things to a whole different level, right? So what have you seen in terms of that kind of couple conversation as it relates to kids, and how kids change the dynamics of relationships?
Well, I would say that this particular conversation is very common, meaning, I want couples to know that they are not alone when they are experiencing the transition of going from just being a couple and being able to focus on each other and themselves to then focusing on their children, because the perspective and the energy changes, right? Meaning there's energy for career, there's energy for each other, there's energy for life, and then all of a sudden then there's energy that has to be utilized to rear a child, which is a different level of energy and time that's required. And so a lot of times when I'm working with couples, I will always start off with kind of assessing where they are with regards to the strength of their relationship, because in reality, a lot of times their role becomes being mom and dad rather than husband and wife.
Mm, wow, that I
So
mean,
then the focus automatically shifts to, well, what's going on with the kids? The conversation is about the children. The conversation, or what's going to happen, or what can happen when they're going to be intimate, when they're not, depends on the kids, their
wow.
age, when they're in the home. So I hope it's okay for us to go there to talk
Oh,
about this, but
absolutely,
that's all
please.
connected to discussing couple relationships.
Yeah.
So with that being said, a lot of times, I have thorough assessments that I go through with couples, but a lot of times I always like to start off with asking them, what time do you set aside for each other?
Wow.
When's the last time you actually dated each other?
Wow.
When's the last time you utilized your community to provide you support with your children? Not because you all aren't great parents, because you are, but just so that you can remember your relationship, because one day those children are going to be adults.
Mm,
And so what happens when they're adults and you forgot about each other,
right.
but you were focused on being mom and dad?
Right. Thank you, Grandma. I'm saying it because
That's
we have dropped the boys off at my mama's house a bunch of times, gone on
that's
vacations. Like
yeah.
seriously, I mean, literally left the country without the boys. Thank you, Grandma. So
Awesome. Yeah. That's right. That's right. So it's awesome to see families that have community, because it really does take the village. It's for the sake of the growth and the development of the children, and also for the sustainability of healthy families, I believe. And I think that there's something to be said about within, our culture, as brown people, and I always like to utilize that encompassing of, BIPOC, Black, Indigenous people of color, and we do consider family, and that's kind of a part of our narrative
right,
through history. But we also recognize that there have been different points in time where that has been challenged through history. So the importance of being able to say, hold on, how are we going to maintain the health of the family, as well as the foundation of family, which is the couple? So that's the reason why I always like to work with couples too, because a lot of times people forget about the mom, or they think about mom and dad and children within that context, but then the role of father and mother, or excuse me, of husband and wife, or like partners, and that part is forgotten.
right.
And so that part is essential in order to even model for children what healthy relationships look like. So it's not just a matter of seeing mom and dad being able to talk about the schedule, but how do they handle disagreements? How do they handle when something happened where they have to discuss something around trust? How do they reconcile their differences? Are they allowed to speak about their emotions or not? Do they feel heard? How is love expressed? All of these things affect, what children see, and then in turn shift their perspective with regards to what they expect, and even what they model themselves.
Right.
And that affects how they interact in their relationships,
That
you know?
I mean, I wow. You said a lot there, and I mean, like in the best possible way. That's and that is something that I think about often as a as a parent, as a father, as a husband, for sure. Making sure that my boys understand that um, no matter what's going on, I love their mother, and sometimes that means I love their mother so much that I will leave them uh, to go spend time with their mother. I love them too, and I'll be
That's
back. But
that's
but it's so important for us to work on our relationship as well, and be able to take that time together. What do you say to um, you know a family unit that is fractured but not broken? And what I mean by that is, when you have a situation where you have parents who have forgotten to think about each other as husband and wife, and they spend all of their time thinking about the kids. Like, how, I mean, obviously this is not one of your sessions here. We're just chatting about it right now, but is there any kind of overarching advice that you would say that family, the husband and wife, should really think about as they're going through the whole process of trying to, as you talked before about dating each other again, and things like that? Like, what are some of the other things that they should think about doing in terms of the conversation piece, right? So, like, how do you have a conversation with someone about feeling like we're not on the same page in our as a couple anymore?
Mhm. So I will say it twofold. One is there's nothing wrong with ever meeting with a therapist or a couples counselor in order to be able to get the advice that, or the support in order to be able to work through shifting patterns in how communication happens. The reason why I'm starting there is because there's so many nuances, and it completely
Mhm.
depends on the situation. But usually, when one starts getting signs that communication is not as effective, unfortunately, a lot of couples that meet with couples counselors usually meet when one person's already, 1 foot out of the door. So when they first start noticing those red flags, that's when I think it's important to have those conversations. If they feel like they are unable to field them on their own, then they should include someone in order to support them to be able to communicate with each other. Because sometimes having a neutral party that can hear each side and be able to reframe it or to restate it in a way where the other partner is willing to hear, because we don't know exactly what has led to those particular breaches in the attachment of the relationship. So when I say that, meaning they're the top 3 reasons why most couples end up in divorce has to do with the one that you mentioned, children, and having conflict around that, finances, or infidelity. So when things like that occur, it's possible to work through every single one of those, because I've worked with couples that have dealt with all of those. At the same time, they have to be willing to do the work, and each of them have to be committed to making the relationship work. So those are so many things that go along with it to kind of ask those questions to determine their level of commitment, to even see if they're willing to put forth the energy that is required in order to repair their relationship.
Fantastic, thank you. And I guess my follow up question to that would be around, because I think you're right. I mean, having a third party, a counselor, a therapist, someone who has no stake in the situation other than to be an ear and help them process what they're going through is so important. Um, Unfortunately, people do wait very late in the process. And my question is, when do you think, maybe you've seen it, or maybe you've studied about this, do you think that more often than not fathers are hesitant to join in couples therapy, or have you seen situations where it is led by the father, the husband, wanting to do the therapy or do you tell
Mhm.
me, like, what have
Yeah,
you had any experience with that?
I actually have. I've had experience with either the wife initiating or the husband initiating. I will say that the majority of the time, at least in my experience, especially since being in private practice, 2015, majority of the time it is the wife.
Mm,
At the same time, I do have fathers and husbands that initiate therapy. So it completely depends on usually who's more ready to have the conversation about change and what it takes in order to be able to see their relationship grow and to heal.
okay.
And so I've worked with fathers that have been, you know, great with words, high emotional intelligence, are looking to make a difference in their relationship. But then I've also had fathers who just said, "Look, I've tried everything, and she just won't talk to me anymore, and I'm trying to determine what to do. And so, for the sake of saving my marriage and my family, can you help me?" So it depends on the situation. But yes, I have seen fathers
Okay.
join therapy and then have their wives join afterwards.
And so, and would you say that, so I, full disclosure, right? So this daddy confessions, my confession is, when I was looking for a counselor, someone to talk to, it was not specifically about my relationship with my wife. It was just about, I felt like I needed to speak to somebody who was, again, a third, in this case, I guess it's a third, second party. I don't even know what, something like that, right? Somebody who wasn't me, who wasn't my family, who could just listen and give me their kind of perspective and feedback on what I needed to do, or what I should think about, things I should think about, right? But what I did was I made sure, for me in that moment, I felt like I needed a man, and I felt like I needed a man of color. Um, and so in that moment, when I was going through that process, I did that with the understanding that I felt like a lot of the things that I was dealing with were specifically things that a man of color could help me, and preferably a father as well, could help me understand and talk through. Have you had situations where people have been hesitant to talk to you because specifically because it was a man and they felt like they didn't want to open up to a woman in this case?
Yes, it's very true. I mean, there are times where I have met with couples, and the man will look at me and say, "Look, I don't want to feel like I'm going to be double teamed, because you're going to understand her perspective and most likely not understand mine." And my response usually is, I don't know what the lived experience is like to be a man. I mean, God made me a certain way, and I'm grateful for the way I am and happy with the way he brought, what he made. And so because of that, there's certain things I don't know through experience. And there's certain things that have gone on, within the context of our society that Black men have had to endure. And those additional pressures, on top of also being, a father, a husband, and things of that nature, it does create nuances of experiences that I myself haven't lived fully. At the same time, I think there's something to be said about when someone truly feels heard and then understood without, regardless of whether I agree or not.
Right.
I'll put it that way, meaning because there are times where I work with couples, and maybe there's one person that's a part of the partnership that started first. So then 3 sessions in, they're coming into therapy and they're like, well, you already kind of built a connection with them. Like, how are you going to talk to me without being biased? And just give me a chance. I want to hear your side of the story. I do prefer to work from the very beginning with the both partners joining. I usually give them each a session on their own so that I can fully hear their story without interruption, because depending on the dynamics within the couple relationship, it could be a battle and I'm
Right.
refereeing rather than hearing,
Right.
right? So because of those points, I like to make sure that each person is heard. And I really do gather a lot of information through assessment, through asking a lot of pertinent relational questions about history and about current, their family of origin. What did they actually witness and see and experience, even through their own parents, or what couples meant to them growing up? What does marriage mean to them? All of those things. What's your belief system? What's your cultural background? All of those things play a part with regards to how people interact within their relationships. What was your perspective even before marriage about children? What's discipline supposed to be like? So sometimes I do kind of carry over into, the parenting and also the couple situation, depending on what their dynamics are.
Right.
But all of those things are a part of, questions that I would ask in order to gather information about who they are. But ultimately, I want to make sure that I hear each of them, their perspective regarding their relationship and what they want to work on. And then I find a way to be able to bridge the two in order to create goals that are going to be relevant for that couple.
Right.
And, once I do that, then most of the time, the gentleman will say, okay, no, she's cool. Like, I feel like she heard me. Like, no, it's not going to be a battle. And, it's not the estrogen versus the testosterone. Like and then they're willing to accept when I do provide feedback, because they know I'll also give feedback to their partner.
Cool.
So I'm not biased with regards to who I'm sharing the feedback with.
Right.
If one said something that was a little suspect, then I'll also challenge the other as well. you know
Yeah, and it's I mean, I assumed that that was the case, right? Like that anybody who does this work is capable, more than capable, of being a neutral party, right? And I think you hit the nail right on the head. It's sometimes it is just that concern about being put into, or feeling like you're being put into a situation where you're being ganged up on, or there's no way that they can possibly be a neutral party in at all, because everything else in your life is always black and white, like it's one way or the other, right? So to have someone, and I think that's one of the things that is most important to me about the about going to counseling, about going to therapy, is just understanding that there is a neutral party. There can be this conversation that happens that doesn't have any um there's no pretense to it, there's no pressure behind it, and nobody is trying to get you to be on their side, right? It's just you coming in and being able to talk about what's going on with you. And so I appreciate that. I appreciate the work you do
Thank you.
so very
Thank
much.
you.
That's awesome. I wanted to talk a little bit about um, how you relate to children
Mhm.
and the in the family therapy. Like, do you normally meet with the kids separately as well, or is it, group meetings? How does that work in your practice?
So I think it depends on what the family needs and also depending on where they begin. Usually, family therapy begins with an identified patient. So the identified patient usually is one of the children. At the same time, there are families that have joined family therapy from the very beginning. And so, with that being said, it depends on the situations that are being dealt with regards to what constellation I meet with at a particular point in time. So that means there could be, for example, if I'm meeting with an adolescent, I may decide to meet with them from the very beginning, and I will build a rapport with them. A lot of times they're building, up their or discovering their identity and to know who they are determining, how relationships work for them. So they like having a level of independence. So talking to them about their concerns, what it is they would like to work on. But then I also always make it clear that I like to incorporate their parents. At the same time, I would do a lot more of supporting them to be able to share information directly with their parents versus someone who is 10 and under, where more likely, if they share particular things, depending on their level of communication and their ability to express emotive language, as well as what they are processing through psychologically, that lends to how I decide to interact with that youth or that child. But I usually then will meet, for example, like half sessions with parents, and there will be sessions where it's completely the entirety of the entire family. So depending on the dynamics, I do prefer working with the however many parents there are at home. Those I want to be able to meet with all parents. I prefer to make sure that I communicate and keep all parents involved. Now there are cases sometimes where I'm unable to do that, depending on work schedules and also depending on if children are between two different homes, because there are a lot of cases too where children may have witnessed their parents going through a divorce. So what it means to be able to kind of be at two different homes and to deal with that particular dynamic, and then also how they can still interact with their parents even though they know that their parents aren't on good terms. So how do you help the parents to be able to coach them through co-parenting skills in order to just be amicable for the sake of their child, because their child goes through loyalty concerns and determining who they need to like and who they shouldn't like, whose side they should choose, different dynamics and things like that that come up. So
Wow.
I would say it ranges the constellation as far as who I meet with. But if I'm meeting with families, I've literally met with families ranging in age from an arm baby to the children, the mom and dad, and grandparents being in the room.
Oh,
I've
wow.
done family therapy where there has been disagreements amongst adults, and they were and their siblings, but they have their own sets of children who are adults, and I've had to work with the adults to work together because
Wow.
they were having concerns around being able to meet for Thanksgiving and Christmas without arguing.
Wow.
So family therapy is quite extensive. So,
Wow.
and family can be looked at from the perspective of sort of traditionally with regards to blood, but then it also can be choice family, meaning like who lives under the same roof as you? Who do you consider to be a loved one within your family? Who is like an auntie or an uncle or mom or dad to you? And so there's different constellations of family.
Wow. No, so that's a great point. Thank you for pointing that out, because I hadn't even thought about that. Like, I'd always, my mind went to, the immediate family unit, right? Like, in my case would be my wife and my two boys. But I probably, if I were to sit down with you, which maybe I should, I probably should bring in my mama as well, because she causes some issues in my that's my mom. Look, that's a whole nother conversation. I won't. That's why I go to therapy, because
I
that.
hear you, and I respect your process as well. And the great thing about family is that when you have individuals within your family, that care very much about being present, sometimes that can be perceived differently depending on, how the family works,
Right.
especially if the family works differently than the previous generation worked, right? Because each family has their opportunity to define roles, responsibilities, um, as well as how to navigate those, how communication works. So I'll say, even for myself, African American family, and then my family's from the South. So there's certain ways that are very traditional, and they like, look, you don't do that. That's not the way you handle it. Like honey child, like if your baby acts up, you spare the rod, you spoil the child, and all this stuff, and
Right.
they will go Bible on me. At the same time, I'm like, well, I'm a clinician, and I mandated reporting, and there's thing is like different ways of being able to navigate discipline now, so it just there's a varied conversation that happens, but I'm always working to honor every generation, but then also help them to understand like what's going on within the times and the context of the times,
Right.
because kids are not having to walk 10 miles to school now. I mean, they know how to use laptops and computers, and they 1 years old. Like I have a nephew, like literally was taking pictures and he wasn't more than 6 months. Like, how did you know how to even, open up my phone to take a picture?
Right. Right.
you
Right.
know?
Right. Right.
So just different things like that when they happen. It's just every generation has different ways that they have adapted in order to, for their family to thrive and to remain connected.
Right.
So I think sometimes that through love, sometimes it's expressed in a way where it can appear as though boundaries are being crossed. But sometimes they're willing to hear it, but then sometimes too, they just like, well, you always gonna be my baby, so I don't know what you're talking about. Like, so it definitely is. It's definitely always that can be a work in progress, with consideration of multiple generations.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
possible.
Cool. So Dr. Cunningham,
Yes, sir.
I have one last question for you, and it really is around understanding, um, how the how we deal with children um in the best possible way as parents. And I know it's a big question. It's an open-ended question, but I asked this question because I think that um one of the things we talked about earlier, you mentioned earlier, was that the way we rear children is can be a cause for issues within the family unit. You also mentioned that it's one of the top three reasons for divorce, right? Is that the children, how we deal with children. So, what are some of the things that parents can take away from this conversation, and possibly going in and having individual conversations with each other about how we can best rear our children in a way that allows us to um, work together as a unit. Like,
Mhm.
whether you playing man to man or zone defense or whatever, everybody else says different things depending on how many kids you have. Like,
Mhm.
how do we best rear our kids and also continue to grow our relationship, and not just wait until they leave the house. Like, we're not just waiting until they turn 18
Mhm.
and they go off to college. Like, what can parents do to really move the whole relationship, the whole family relationship forward?
So I would say that the entire house having set rules or even disciplines are important. The reason why I say that is because sometimes we do think about it in terms of it being traditional. And I know there's so many different viewpoints around parenting and parenting styles. So I'm not going to necessarily go into the nuances of different parenting styles, like attachment parenting, and there's a plethora. I mean, literally thousands and thousands of books. But what I always say to parents from the very beginning is there is no such thing as a manual that is side by side with your child when they're born.
Mm.
Or you can look in the bottom of their right foot and kind of say like, oh, okay, so at 16 you're gonna have to watch out for that, because then they'll, you'll know how to navigate that part of their life. But what it boils down to is that, even based on research, the one of the most important things is that a child knows that they have boundaries, because boundaries create levels of safety. It helps them to know that, they will only be allowed to go but so far, or if they end up in a situation that may be dangerous without them being aware of it, of the nuances of it, they will have someone there to protect them. So that creates a level of secure attachment within them. But then also being able to have conversation when things are on their mind and things are bothering them. Because there's a balance between discipline, but then also a child not only feeling heard, but then being able to learn how to be able to express what they're thinking and feeling. And those are ways of being able to build a strong, emotionally safe connection with their parents. Because usually the children that are securely attached are the ones that become youth, adolescents, and adults that express a level of confidence and security in who they are. And so, regardless of who they become in the future, if they know that they have someone in their corner that is going to be honest with them and provide discipline and boundaries, at the same time is going to, express love and concern for who they are and hearing what's going on for them, that usually helps and assists with them growing up to be, upstanding, community individuals or individuals within their community.
Right, right.
And of course, again, what parents model usually it speaks louder than what they say. And that's the one thing about the different generations. It's like, growing up, you hear about baby boomers. They always like, kids are seen and not heard.
Mm-hmm.
What I say, you better do what I say,
Stay
and
in the
not as
child's
I
place.
do. Yeah. And
Yeah.
so those things that, they find through research and even just in my experience and where we are in society now, that, kids need to see, because kids will, even if they are in a family where they can't actually say it, they will be aware of it, make mental note of it. Okay, well, this is what mom is really doing, even though she's saying do that. But this
Right.
is what dad is saying, but this is what dad is doing, And then so those are those things where it's important for them to be able to see that what is being done and said match, because then it provides consistency for them, in order for them to know how to navigate, communication, to navigate how to interact or behave in particular situations. And even again, to go back to what I shared earlier, when they see mom and dad having to discuss things, that can turn into how they communicate.
Right.
So sometimes I'll hear parents say, like, my child is so angry and they're yelling all the time, and we're trying to help them to not, curse and different things like that. And I'll, hear everything that's going on within the family, and I'll kind of ask questions about, well, what's going on? What's the family dynamic like? What's going on between mom and dad? And they're like, well, yeah, they argue all the time. Well,
Mm.
if mom and dad are arguing all the time and you're wondering why your child is angry and they get upset and they scream, not to say it's, full blame on the parents. And because
Right.
I don't ever want a parent to feel as though there are situations where children don't pick up behaviors and habits outside of the context of home, because especially with teenagers, they tend to flow with their peers.
Right.
Less likely to happen with children that are 10 and under, like pre-adolescent, child's age. They tend to focus more on what's going on within their family dynamic. But children, even if parents don't actually fight and argue, they can still feel when they need to be on pins and needles or walking around in eggshells,
Mm.
because a lot of times dynamics can be felt and not just experienced through overt means.
Right. Right. Wow. I mean, no, I appreciate that. I kept thinking, the whole saying of "do as I say and not as I do," right? And how that is problematic, right? Because it goes to what you were saying. Like, we need to model these things for our kids in the best possible way. So right down to the way we converse and the way we show affection, and all those things are so important. So, wow, thank you,
You're
Dr.
welcome, and thank
Cunningham.
you. Thank you for having
Appreciate
me
you.
here.
Yeah, thank you for coming today. This has been awesome. I really, really do appreciate this. Before I let you go, can you tell the people how they can reach you?
Okay, the best way to reach me is on my website, www.necllc.website. Again, necllc.website. And there you will find, my number, my email address, all of my social media contacts, and please even become a member, sign up, and then I will be able to connect you with my Dr. C community app.
Cool.
So you will have access to events that I have, that I will be hosting. as well as blogs and forums for discussion.
Cool. I should have came out for the karaoke. I missed it.
I will have karaoke again on April, I believe, the 23rd, Friday the 23rd.
All right. All right. I'm gonna try to make
Bring
it.
the entire family. It's a family event.
All right. All right.
All
So
right.
yeah, so and Dr. Cunningham, are you doing virtual sessions with people as well? Can someone
Yes.
so people
I
can do
definitely
virtual
am.
sessions?
I'm currently, providing telehealth sessions,
Cool.
and currently in Connecticut, but that is expanding, just so you
Okay.
know, beyond the state of Connecticut.
Okay. Okay. Well, I got a little bit of people who might be listening in Connecticut. Hopefully one of the 4 people who listen to the podcast is in Connecticut. Uh,
But
but
if
yeah,
not, they can still join my events, and please still connect, because again, depending on where the demand is or the information I gather, then lends to what states I will be licensed in
cool,
and be
cool, cool.
working.
Very good. Very good.
Mhm.
Awesome. Well, I'm gonna say thank you, Norja.
And
It has
thank
been
you,
great
John. I really appreciate
chatting
it.
with you. Thank you for being on the show. If hopefully, maybe we'll be able to do this again sometime, and
Yes,
maybe
we
somebody
definitely.
who's listening might have some specific questions for Dr. Cunningham, and we have you back on to answer some questions. So thank you,
Okay.
thank you, thank you for being here.
You're
Have a
welcome.
great day, and I look forward to connecting with you again soon.